My name is Maya Carter, and at 29, I never pictured myself hurtling north through a roaring blizzard to find my mother. My SUV's heater was on full blast, but the wind howled so fiercely it rattled the windows. I filmed a quick intro on my dash camera. If you're cozy where you are, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. It felt absurd to ask for likes while inches of snow piled up on the hood, but this was how I lived now, always half performance, half confession. My life in Boston was neat and ordered. I'd climbed from junior associate at a boutique agency to creative director in under 5 years. My boyfriend Isaac and I shared a loft with hardwood floors and a view of the harbor. We had routines: Sunday, brunch at the market, Tuesday trivia at the pub, Friday date nights. I curated my existence so carefully that my past felt like someone else's story. Until 3 days ago, when that trembling voicemail arrived. It began like every memory of my mother, warm, familiar, then twisted into something I didn't recognize. Maya, it's your mom. I don't know where I am. My car died. I'm so cold. Her voice cracked, as if the words were shards of ice. The message ended with a sob and silence. I hit play again, then again. All I felt was the quiet weight of my own guilt. As a girl, I remembered her as magic. Saturday mornings meant blueberry pancakes shaped like bears' bedroom forts, lit by flashlights, her soft voice reading fairy tales until I drifted off. I still heard her singing lullabies in my dreams. But when I turned 13, the magic faded. Bank layoffs, bruised knees from jobless days, and a fridge that sat empty too often. I grew up making ramen dinners and forging her signature so I could go to school. I became the parent. She became the project I couldn't fix. College was freedom. A scholarship covered tuition. I worked 2 part-time jobs to cover rent and ramen. I tasted normal for the first time: hot showers, reliable electricity, weekends without fear. I called home less and less until I stopped entirely. My therapist called it a healthy boundary. My friends said I deserved peace. But a tiny voice in me wondered if I'd abandoned her. The last time I saw her was 3 years ago at my apartment. Isaac had just moved in. I dressed the place in spring flowers and bought sparkling cider. Mom seemed calm at first, until she drank too much. By dessert, she was slurring and accusing Isaac of being beneath me. I begged her to stop. She yelled that I was ashamed of her spat claims, that I was selfish like my father, and shattered her glass against my wall. The fight left me shaking. She threw down one final line, "Don't come back," and I didn't. So I stared at my phone, trembling. I called our old neighbor, Mrs. Abbott. No answer. I found the apartment manager's number and learned my mother hadn't paid rent in months. She'd vanished. I tracked the cell tower to Millville, 200 miles north. My heart pounded. A storm was bearing down. I packed only what I could carry: a thick coat, wool socks, extra gloves, protein bars, flares, a small first aid kit. Isaac watched me throw things in a duffel bag, his face etched with worry. "You can't be serious," he said. "They say the roads will be impassable by midnight." She sounded scared, I said, ignoring the tremor in my voice. "If I don't go, I'll hate myself forever." He handed me his keys. "Promise me you'll come back if it gets too dangerous." I nodded, though my gut told me I would not. Boston receded behind me. The highway was clear for the first hour. My Spotify road trip playlist felt ironic, so I switched to classical something to calm my racing thoughts. As snow began to swirl, I dialed Emma, my college roommate. "Please don't do this," she whispered through the speaker. "You don't owe her anything." "She's confused and alone," I said. "What if she's hurt?" "Then call the sheriff in Millville," she said, "and tell them that a 52-year-old woman might be wandering in a storm. They'll laugh me off." Emma paused. "Just be careful." 2 hours later, I reached the road closed sign on Route 12. A snowfall so heavy it looked like milk. Gusts pounded the windshield. I pulled into the Ruby's Diner parking lot, headlights cutting through drifts. Inside, the scent of frying bacon and coffee was a balm. The waitress, Doris, silver-haired and stout, took one look at me and said, "You heading north?" "Yes," I whispered, rubbing my arms. "Any way around the closure, County Road 47, she said, pouring me hot chocolate. Longer winding through the pines, but at least it's not plowed into oblivion. A trucker leaned over. His beard was frosted. his eyes kind. "I'll give you a tip," he said. "Trees block some of the wind, but watch your speed. Curves are sharp." His name was Martin. He handed me a crumpled map marking turns in red pen. Cell service, he warned, would die once I left the diner. I thanked him and paid my bill, my fingers trembling around the handle of my mug. Back in the SUV, I traced the route on the dashboard. County Road 47 twisted like a serpent into shadowed woods. The snowfall had muffled the world into a blanket of white. Every tree bowed under the weight of snow, every bend held new uncertainty. I swallowed hard and eased onto the road. At first, the drive was almost peaceful snowflakes landing softly on the hood, the world hushed under winter's hush. My headlights carved a tunnel through the pines. I thought about Mom, the lullabies, the birthdays she never missed when she was sober, the horror of her drunken tirades. Beneath my fear and anger lay a deeper current relief that she was alive and dread at what I might find. An hour in, I realized the temperature gauge had dropped. My phone pinged with low battery warnings. The only light came from my headlights and the glow of the dashboard. When I rounded a blind curve, I nearly clipped a fallen branch. I swerved hard in my throat, and the SUV fishtailed onto the snowbank. Tires spun useless. I pumped the gas, praying for traction. Nothing. My breath fogged the windows as panic crashed through me. I sat for a moment, head in my hands, willing myself to calm. Then headlights appeared behind me, dim but steady. A pickup truck eased to a stop. A man in his 40s hopped out, boots crunching in the snow. "You okay?" he called. "I'm stuck," I shouted, unlocking the window. My mom." He introduced himself as Paul. In minutes, he detached a tow strap and yanked my SUV free. He refused any payment. "Follow me," he said, pointing down the road. "I turn off at the lake, but I'll get you past the worst." I followed his taillights like a lifeline. When he peeled off, he waved and vanished. The map in my hand felt both precious and puny. I drove on, neck stiff, adrenaline fueling me. By the time the welcome sign welcomed me to Millville, it was well past midnight. The town was ghostly snow, piled high streets empty. I found one motel with a flickering no vacancy sign, but the night clerk offered me the lobby couch. Better than freezing in the car. I curled up in my coat boots on duffel as pillow. Sleep was elusive. I drifted in and out, haunted by my mother's voice. At dawn, I peered through frost-laced windows, at a world transformed, drifts taller than mailboxes, cars buried to their roofs, a blizzard still raging. A TV behind the counter blared, "State of Emergency." Historic snowfall. I grabbed coffee from the clerk and charged my phone at an outlet behind the desk. My battery clung to 10%. I called Isaac. "Thank God," he said. "You made it. The roads are a mess. Don't go back out." "I have to find her," I whispered. "I know," he said with a sigh. I could feel through the line. "Be safe." Map in hand, I prepared to leave. Outside, the wind was a living thing biting ruthless. My breath came in quick clouds. I hugged my coat tighter and started the SUV, warming my frozen fingers on the steering wheel. County Road 16 into town was plowed just enough for emergency vehicles. I wasn't emergency services, but I felt the press of necessity. The first few miles were slow snow packed into ruts, hidden ice. Every curve required white-knuckle attention. Twice, I detoured around fallen trees. Once, I nearly slid into a ditch, avoiding an abandoned sedan. When I finally saw the rusted sign for Jensen's Gas and Mart Relief slammed into me like a punch. The pump stood silent beneath drifts. No lights glowed inside the convenience store. My heart snarled with fear. This was where Mrs. Abbott said she last heard from Mom, an abandoned car, shivering wind, no footprints. I cut the engine and sat, breath shaking. My thumbs found the flare kit on the floor. I grabbed a flare and cracked it. The red light bloomed through the snow, a terrible beacon. I stuffed it in my pocket and climbed out into the storm heart, pounding so loud, I was sure I'd alert the entire county. Snow clung to my hair and coat. I squinted through swirling white. The building was only a few dozen feet away, stone wall on one side. I stumbled forward, every step heavy. Then I saw her huddled figure, pressed against brick limbs, curled tight scarf hanging loose. Blue lips, still as a mannequin. "Mom," I screamed, rushing forward. She didn't move. Cold stole my breath. I dropped beside her, shaking her shoulder. She stirred, eyes fluttered open. Recognition swam and faded. "Maya?" She whispered, voice a ragged gasp. "So cold!" I pressed my coat under her head. My own coat. "I'm here," I said, voice cracking. "I found you!" Her eyes closed. I dropped to my knees, hands fumbling under layers for my gloves. My mind raced, no phone signal storm still raging, no help for miles. I lifted her in my arms. Her body was lighter than I remembered. Hypothermia set in fast. Behind us, the gas station door stood locked. I pounded on it until my knuckles bled. Silence answered. Windows too high to break. The alarm would shriek. No choice. I glanced around. A maintenance shed crouched at the building's side, a simple padlock on the door. I yanked at it with frozen hands and found a loose board. It gave way. Inside the shed was cramped but windproof. I dragged my mother in, laid her on a pile of old blankets, and wrapped my own coat around her. Rain gear tools, empty containers, nothing seemed helpful, but it was shelter. As I sat beside her shivering frame, I realized the drive north was only the beginning of something that would change us both forever. Snow battered the maintenance shed like 1,000 tiny fists. But inside, we crouched together, a single body of warmth against the gale. I pressed my mother's head into my chest, wrapping her in my damp jacket, and the thermal blanket I'd scavenged from my pack. Each ragged breath she drew frosted the air, and I tilted her chin up to sip melted snow from a cracked plastic container, coaxing her to drink even as her lips trembled. Her eyelashes fluttered when I whispered her name, Diane, and a faint spark of recognition glowed behind her clouded eyes. I dug through my pockets for the energy bar, crumbling pieces into her mouth, and listened to her swallow relief and fierce love warbling in my chest. She tried to speak, but only a broken moan emerged, so I scrubbed her cheeks with my sleeve and promised I'd get her help. My gloves lay forgotten on the floor. My bare hands trembled as I threaded a length of insulation between her back and the cold boards, hoping to block the wind that seeped through cracks. The flare I'd struck moments before sputtered in my pocket, its dying ember reminding me that time was running out. I rose on shaking legs, brushing snow off my coat and scanning the dark forest through the narrow gap by the door. No footprints except ours. No lights. The storm had every path swallowed. My phone lay lifeless on the floor. No bars, no hope. I swallowed fear and went back to her side, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead, and sharing memories of Boston, how the fall foliage painted the common in flames of gold and crimson, the way the harbor lights twinkled on cold nights, how my cat pounced on stray points of laser light until he tumbled off the couch in defeat. Her breathing slowed, and for a moment, I caught the ghost of the woman who read me stories at bedtime, made pancake shapes, wiped away tears. I closed my eyes and let the memory anchor me, grounding the icy terror. Then she murmured, "I'm so sorry." May and I felt a new kind of ache bloom in my chest, years of hurt and anger collapsing into a single soft ache of forgiveness. "We'll leave together," I promised. "I'm not letting you go." I pulled the tarp tighter around us and settled beside her, tucking my legs around her battered frame. Dawn would never break inside this iron coffin of snow, but I refused to surrender to darkness. I told her stories of my new life, Isaac's warm hands, our loft's hardwood floors, the way morning light drifted across our windows. She nodded, her eyelids heavy, but her grip on my fingers firm. I made a vow that I would carry her out of the storm no matter the cost. Hours passed in a blur of snow and shivering until at last, I heard a distant rumble that felt like salvation. My heart skittered. I abandoned the tarp and stumbled outside my boots, sinking into drifts up to my knees. Raising my arm overhead, I cracked another flare. Its red glow bloomed in the white haze, a desperate cry against the void. I shouted until my throat ached. "Help, please!" The wind stole my words, but I saw it then, a headlight flickering through the curtain of snow. I waved the flare until the beam drew closer. A hulking silhouette emerging an old Ford truck with a heavy plow twisted on the front. It ground toward me, carving a path through the drifts. Relief gave me strength, and I half ran, half slid to my mother's side, lifting her as though she weighed nothing. The driver, an older man with crinkled eyes and a kind face, jumped down and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders before helping me onto the running board. "You found her," he said in a low voice as he climbed back in. Lucky I was clearing this road. As the truck lurched forward, I clutched my mother to me, feeling the heat of the cab seep through the metal. The heater roared to life, melting the last shards of snow on her coat. I pressed her to the seat, rubbing her hands until color returned. "Thank you," I whispered so fiercely it rattled the glass. "You saved her." Outside, the storm still raged, but inside, we were safe for a moment, a fragile bubble of warmth and hope. The driver introduced himself as Earl Jensen and guided us toward town headlights, slicing through the whiteout. I called Isaac on my phone the instant we hit a patch of service static, then his frantic voice. "Maya, are you safe?" "How is she?" I swallowed tears. "We're on our way to Millville," I said, voice steady. "She's alive. I'll call you again when I know more." I hung up and knelt beside my mother, brushing her hair from her forehead. Her eyes fluttered open. "May!" She croaked a whisper in the storm. I smiled through wet cheeks. "I'm here, Mom. We're almost out." The truck rumbled past abandoned cars buried in drifts, past the closed storefronts of Main Street, frozen in time. Snowbanks glowed under the headlights, like alabaster monuments. I tightened my grip on my mother's hand, feeling her pulse gather strength. Ahead, a flicker of neon marked the hospital entrance. Earl turned off the highway onto a path that wasn't fully plowed, the cab rocking, as he navigated icy ruts. "They'll get her inside fast," he said. "Keep talking to her. Warmth and words will pull her through." I recited everything I could, childhood stories, songs we'd sung together, memories of holidays when the tree lights blinking under our roof meant everything was right in the world. Her breathing evened as we bumped toward the emergency room. I reached for my phone again, no bars yet, but I tucked it into my pocket. Right now, she was more real than any screen. At the hospital doors, a team in heavy coats rushed to meet us, slipping between snowdrifts and roaring engines. Nurses eased my mother onto a gurney, blankets piled high. A doctor unhooked her coat and began checking her vitals. I hovered beside her, still clutching her hand, as the world narrowed to the steady beep of machines. "Hypothermia," a nurse murmured. "Core temperature dangerously low. We'll warm her." I nodded, unable to speak, tears freezing on my lashes. Earl rested a hand on my shoulder, silent solidarity in the chaos. Then he slipped away into the storm. I watched him disappear, the doors swinging closed behind him, and realized the journey had only just begun. The storm had driven me into a dark place where I feared my mother was lost forever, but it had also forced me back to the one person I needed most. As technicians whisked her toward the trauma room, I whispered, "Hold on, Diane, hold on." Then I sank onto the cold linoleum floor, arms wrapped around myself, and let the pain of 3 years dissolve in that hospital foyer. The storm still howled outside, but inside the world felt strangely quiet, the calm that follows the fiercest winds. The fragile peace before the next reckoning. I sat on the cold linoleum floor of the emergency department. Back against the wall, my mother whisked away into the trauma suite with its bright lights and rushing voices. And for a moment, the world narrowed to the steady beep of monitors and my ragged breath. My legs ached from kneeling, and my coat crusted with snow hung heavy on my shoulders, like the weight of a promise I hadn't yet fulfilled that I would carry her through this storm and beyond. The gurney doors whooshed closed, muffling the doctor's words. But I caught severe hypothermia and unstable vital signs before darkness swelled at the edges of my vision. A nurse, pressing a blanket into my lap, told me to come with her. My knees protested, but I followed each step, echoing in the hushed corridor. In a curtained cubicle, she laid my mother's coat across a chair, then guided me to a recliner where a hot pack and a cup of weak tea waited. My fingers trembled as I wrapped the pack against my chest, tasting stale hospital air that stung my lungs. I closed my eyes and breathed, recalling the feel of her warm hand on my fevered brow when I was 8. The smell of her shampoo as she braided my hair for school memories that felt like lifelines now. The nurse slipped away. Minutes felt like hours. Just when panic began to chase clarity from my mind, a woman in scrubs appeared, introducing herself as Dr. Winters. She offered a seat, pulled up a stool, and examined her clipboard with professional detachment until her pen stopped, and she looked up, eyes softer. "Your mother is stable for now." We've raised her core temperature, but her condition remains critical. Hypothermia can cause cardiac arrhythmias and brain swelling. She's intubated and sedated to help her body recover. My throat closed. I blinked back tears. "Can I see her?" I asked. Voice small. She hesitated, then offered gentle counsel. "In a few hours, once we're confident she can tolerate the stimulation. For now, rest yourself and warm up. Hypothermia affects you too." I shook my head. "If she wakes and I'm not there," she laid a hand on my arm. "She's in good hands. We'll call you at first sign of improvement." I swallowed the lump in my throat and exhaled. As she left, the overhead fluorescent lights flickered, and I realized my legs had cramped into numb pins and needles. I rose, gathered my mother's scattered belongings, the tarp scrap, the torn insulation, my empty water container, and stuffed them into my duffel. The heavy door whooshed as I stepped into the hallway, colder than the room I'd just left. White coats drifted past, murmuring in clipped tones. I navigated toward a small restroom, peeled off layers damp with snow and fear, and pounded hot water into my coat until it steam-cleaned my soaked jacket. As steam curled in the mirror's edges, I scrubbed snow and guilt from my face, then wrapped myself in a discarded spare scrubs top a nurse had lent me, pulling it over my head like new armor. Outside the bathroom, I found a charging station and tried my phone. Bars flickered to life. A message from Isaac. "Did you get updating? Is she okay?" I thumbed back. "Stable. Critical. Feels surreal. Call you soon?" My fingers paused. I typed again. "I love you. Sent." Relief and longing warred in my chest. I returned to the waiting area to find a wheelchair by the nurse's station and wheeled myself down the hallway to my mother's room. Behind double doors marked Trauma ICU. The hum of machines and hiss of oxygen spilled into the corridor. A nurse met me, washed her hands, and opened the door to reveal a stark room awash in pale green light. My mother lay on a narrow bed, tubes and wires cradling her body like a net of lifelines. Her face was ghostly cheeks, hollow eyelids fluttering beneath closed lashes. I slipped onto the stool by her side, took her hand so small and chilled despite blankets, and pressed my cheek to her knuckles. "Maya," she whispered, lips dry. Her eyelids cracked open, confusion swirling in her gaze. "Mom, it's me." She blinked the moment stretching before clarity surfaced. I was so cold. I brushed hair from her forehead. "I found you." Her breath hitched. "You came." A soft smile flickered. "Always." Her eyes drifted shut as nurses monitored her. I stayed until my phone buzzed a text from Mrs. Abbott. "Your mom ended up in Millville General. Stable. You there?" I lifted my head and sighed. Then I called Emma, my voice trembling. "She's alive." Emma's relief crackled through the line. "What's next?" I exhaled. "Doctors suspect early onset dementia." Silence. "What?" Her voice cracked. I repeated what my mother had whispered in the shed, the words I'd barely dared believe: dementia. Emma swore softly. "God, May." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "We'll know more after they run labs. For now, she needs observation, and then probably transfer to a specialized unit." I sank back against the wall outside the ICU doors, my heart pounding in the hollow silence. Early onset dementia at 52, like a storm buried under yet another storm. My mother's confusion, her voicemail's incoherence, the chaos in her apartment, all made sense now. But making sense offered no comfort. I closed my eyes and let memories flood me. The lullabies, the betrayals, the endless adult responsibilities I'd carried as a child. Guilt mingled with sorrow. I should have called her. I should have looked closer at the signs. I should have found her before the snow. But I hadn't. I breathed, steadying myself. The only way forward was to step into this next storm too with her. I rose and found the nurse's station. Who do I speak to about power of attorney? The nurse blinked. "You're next of kin." I nodded. "Can you guide me?" She hesitated, then handed me a form and a card for the hospital social worker. "She'll help with guardianship and discharge planning." I clutched the papers like a lifeline. I thanked her and returned to my mother, kneeling to smooth her hair. "We'll fix this," I whispered into the quiet hum, my promise sealing itself in the steady beep of the monitor. That evening, Dr. Winters reappeared, holding a file. We sat in the consultation room while she reviewed scans and notes. "Your mother's labs show no other major organ damage," she said, "but the MRI indicates atrophy in the hippocampus consistent with early-onset Alzheimer's. We've started memantine to slow progression, and once she's off sedation, neurology will assess cognitive function. But realistically, she'll need comprehensive care and supervision." My chest tightened. The walls closed in. "Care," I echoed. "You mean she can't go home by herself?" Dr. Winters nodded gently. "Independent living is not advisable. You'll need to consider assisted living or in-home care. We can connect you with social services and support groups." I clenched the edge of the table, determination flaring. "I'll make it work." She offered a wan smile. "Your mother is fortunate to have an advocate. Early intervention improves outcomes." I stood gathering the papers into my duffel. Tears pricked as I thought of the woman who once cradled me, now requiring cradle herself. Outside the hospital at midnight, snow had dusted the pavement into silver. I texted Isaac, diagnosis confirmed. "Early onset Alzheimer's. She's stable for transfer. I need to stay." His reply was immediate. "I'm on the next train." I exhaled, the weight of decisions pressing close, power of attorney forms, guardianship hearings, care arrangements. Moving Mom to Boston, reshaping my life around hers. Yet beneath the fear lay a curious steadiness, a sense that for the first time in years, I would not turn away. As I slipped back through the automatic doors, into the warmth of the hospital, I whispered into the hush. "We'll face this together," and for the first time, I believed it. Isaac arrived just as dawn's pale light seeped through the hospital's front doors, his coat still dusted with snow from the platform. And when I saw him standing there, tired-eyed and travel-worn, my heart unclenched for the first time in hours. I rushed into his arms, tears warm against the cold of his jacket, and whispered, "She's stable," while he held me like a lifeline. We met with the social worker in a small office lined with pamphlets on elder care and legal forms. Her gentle voice guided us through power of attorney documents and guardianship papers, explaining how to manage my mother's finances and make medical decisions on her behalf. After signing pages that felt like both chains and shields, we arranged for Diane's transfer to a Boston memory care facility that specialized in early-onset Alzheimer's, far safer than her empty apartment. As we left the hospital, the sky had brightened to a bruise of purple and gold, and we loaded Mom, still sedated, and wrapped in a warm blanket, into the SUV. The drive back to Boston was silent, except for the hum of the engine and the occasional beep from her portable monitor. And I found myself speaking to her as though she could hear every word, reminding her how we used to dance in the kitchen to old Motown records, how she taught me to braid each strand of my hair, how her pancakes shaped like hearts still tasted like love. Inching through the thawing roads, we passed storefronts waking to spring rectangles of snow melting on rooftops, and I realized that each mile was both an end and a beginning. At the facility just outside the city, crisp and modern staff greeted us by name and steered us into a bright room with large windows overlooking a garden courtyard. I helped Mom into a soft armchair, clumsy with the tubes and blankets, and watched as confusion mixed with curiosity on her face. "Where am I?" she asked, voice hoarse. I knelt beside her, taking both hands. "You're home, Mom," I said, choosing those words because they felt right. A social worker showed us around a sunlit common area, where residents painted and played music, hallways lined with family photos, therapy rooms scented with lavender. We met the nurse coordinator, who explained her medication schedule, the art therapist who promised weekly sessions, and the chef who noted Diane's tastes, her love of cherry pie, her need for soft foods. Afterwards, Isaac and I walked through a nearby park that smelled of wet earth and new blooms. He slipped his arm around my waist and said quietly, "You did the right thing." I leaned into him, the weight of the past 3 years pressing down, and let myself feel relief for the first time in ages. Back at the facility's entrance, Mom reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly firm. In that moment, I remembered the little girl who once clung to her mother's skirt during thunderstorms, and I whispered, We'll walk this path together. Imagining the road ahead, difficult, uncertain, but ours to travel side by side. Each morning, I wake before dawn, the pale light pooling on the window pane like a promise, and I slip quietly out of bed to tiptoe down the hall toward my mother's room in the memory care wing. The corridors are hushed, broken only by the soft click of my shoes on polished linoleum and the distant hum of the HVAC. And sometimes I catch the scent of lavender from the therapy room, where she and the other residents paint sunflowers on canvas or press petals into clay. I pause at her door, where her nameplate gleams under the overhead light, and I peer in to find her sitting on the edge of her bed, frowning as though she's puzzled by her own reflection in the window. "Good morning, Mom," I whisper, and she turns her gaze traveling across my face until recognition blooms like spring. She smiles before she speaks a small, diffident tilt of her head. "Maya," she says softly, as if tasting the word anew, and reaches for my hand. We begin our ritual. I help her into a cozy cardigan, her favorite sky blue wool, and guide her to the seating area by the window, where two armchairs face each other and a basket of yarn and half-finished knitting projects rest nearby. Some days she wants to knit slipping needles between fingers that still remember how, so I settle beside her, looping yarn through stitches as she murmurs about colors she doesn't quite recall choosing. Other mornings, she leans back and listens as I read from my journal reflections on work's small triumphs, the blossoming magnolia tree outside our apartment. I speak slowly so she can follow each sentence. She nods, sometimes interjecting a question about something she's forgotten. And when that happens, we laugh together, her laughter soft and surprised, as if discovering joy anew. By mid-morning, we wheel through the hallway toward the art therapy room, where sunlight filters through high windows and paint-splattered smocks hang on hooks. She selects a brush and dips it into aquamarine sweeping broad strokes on a canvas stiff with promise. When she pauses, I ask what she sees ripples on a pond, memories of a summer lake. She tilts her head, studying her work, then replies, "Maybe both." In that moment, I see the mother I knew, a woman who taught me to look for beauty in unexpected places, even as the dementia edges her memory away. After art class, we join other families in the common room, where the chef has prepared a lunch of vegetable soup and fresh bread. I encourage her to eat, spooning broth across her lips when her hands tremble, and she smiles at the small kindness, murmuring thanks in a voice thick with emotion. Across the table, fellow children of parents with dementia share stories: a grandmother who sings old hymns at odd times, a father who rearranged furniture and forgot why. We find solace in laughter and empathy, forging bonds that ease the lonely burden of caregiving. My phone buzzes with messages from Isaac, questions about my day, encouragements laced with love reminders to rest. He stops by after work whenever he can, his presence a beacon of normalcy in a world rearranged by illness. Sometimes he brings takeout spicy Thai curry or sushi from our favorite spot, and we sit in the facility's small coffee corner plates, balanced on a circular table, sharing bites and updates on my mother's mood and appetite. On those evenings, I let myself lean into him, his shoulder solid beneath my head. And for a moment, I can pretend the storm is over, that the dangerous drive, the frozen shed, the frantic rescue were all a dream. But reality returns when I wake at night, imagining my mother alone in the dark, and I slip back into Scrub's hospital-issue threads I wear under my coat and return to the memory care wing to check on her, smoothing blankets, straightening pillows, reminding her where she is and who I am until her breathing steadies. Weekends are our sanctuary. We leave the fluorescent halls for the botanical gardens, by the Charles strolling paths that loop through magnolia trees and rose bushes. One Sunday, she paused beneath a cherry blossom in full bloom, translucent petals drifting around her like snow in spring. And I asked if she remembered the orchard in our hometown where we picked fruit every May. Her eyes glistened. "I do," she said. "You slipped and fell in the mud." I laughed. "You pulled me up and carried me home." She smiled at the memory, her hand lingering on my arm as though anchoring herself to the past. Those moments of clarity are rare, but they sustain me, proof that love can outlast forgetfulness, that memory lives in the spaces between words. As the months pass, I settle into a rhythm that balances my career and my caregiving role, I've negotiated part-time remote work with my agency, pitching major campaigns from my laptop between visits, earning empathy and respect from colleagues who witness my resolve. My boss even invited me to lead an outreach program for dementia awareness, recognizing that my personal journey could inform creative strategy and lend authenticity to our brand voice. I throw myself into the project, collaborating with nonprofits, framing stories that celebrate small moments of connection rather than the tragedy of decline. I visit support groups, record video testimonials, craft social media posts that highlight the humanity behind the diagnosis. Each campaign success is tinged with bittersweet pride. I know that my mother may not fully grasp the impact of these efforts, yet somewhere in the echoes of her preserved long-term memory, she understands I'm fighting for her dignity. My father calls occasionally, tentative at first, then more frequently as news of Mom's condition spreads through family networks, and our conversations are awkward at first, years of distance, woven into every silence. But one afternoon, after reading him a text my mother left on my phone, a sticky note that said, "Thank you for the blue scarf. Despite having never owned such a scarf, he breaks down in tears." "She still loves you," he says, and I realize that her essence endures in fragments of mind and memory. We tentatively rebuild a fragile connection, sharing updates, sending photos, beginning to weave a tapestry of collective care around her. Despite the deep love I feel, there are days when frustration flares when she insists I'm her nurse, not her daughter, or mistakes a caregiver for a stranger. In those moments, I breathe through the pain, remembering how she held me when I was small, how she whispered that I was brave, and I remind myself that the disease is a thief, not a reflection of our bond. I learn to redirect rather than correct, to validate her emotions, even when they spring from confusion. And slowly, I discover compassion I didn't know I possessed. I begin keeping a voice recorder by her bed, capturing the lullabies she hums in the dark, the snippets of conversation. She savors evidence of the woman who raised me. These recordings become gifts treasured for their glimpses of lucidity, for the warmth in her voice, when she recalls childhood stories or offers simple prayers of gratitude. One evening, as the sun dips below the skyline and the neon lights of Boylston Street flicker on, I sit beside her bed in the facility's quiet room and play the recordings. She listens, eyes closed, and when her lips part in a smile, I know I've preserved something sacred, much larger than memory love, distilled into sound. Somewhere between the daily routines and therapeutic activities, between laughter and tears, I realize that this chapter of our lives, written by illness and resilience, has reshaped me into someone who honors the broken places in others, who cherishes the fragments of connection that survive even the deepest storms. And as I help her settle under the soft comforter each night, whispering the names of flowers she once taught me, I understand that our journey is far from over, but that together we carry each other forward, weaving new memories where old ones slip away, forging a path of compassion and courage that no blizzard, no disease can ever erase. Mornings now begin with the soft gray light of Boston filtering through the curtains as I slip out of bed, pad down the hall in socks warmed by last night's heat, and step into the sunroom where Mom sits in her favorite armchair, her gaze drifting between the bonsai I coaxed her to nurture and the headlines on my laptop screen. She turns to me and smiles, the same gentle curve I remember from my childhood, and calls Maya, as if greeting me after a long journey. I pour 2 mugs of tea, one for her steeped, just so with mint leaves, and one strong and dark for myself, and settle on the sofa opposite her. We carry on our ritual. I share snippets of my day. An email from the Alzheimer's Association, praising our latest campaign. An offer to keynote a charity gala. A dinner date with Isaac tomorrow. And she listens, her eyes bright with curiosity, even when a flash of confusion passes. When she pauses to ask for clarification, I speak slowly, framing each thought so she can follow. And she nods, tracing the rim of her cup with slender fingers. By mid-morning, we wander together through the courtyard garden where magnolia and forsythia unfurl their petals like promises of renewal. She pauses at each bloom, closing her eyes to breathe in its scent, and sometimes whispers, "I remember this," as though naming an old friend. Then we return inside, and I guide her to the art room where canvases await paint palettes arranged like rainbows. And she chooses a brush, dipping it into a pool of cerulean to paint sky above a twisted olive tree, an echo of the bonsai she tends in the sunroom. And when I ask what she sees, she smiles and says, "Possibility," as though the word contains all the hope we share. In afternoons, we gather with other families in the common room, where stories spill like warm soup of spouses who sing cockeyed songs in the night, of parents who hide behind curtains to watch grandchildren play, until we laugh through tears, forging bonds through shared struggle. Isaac visits when daylight still lingers, his tall frame filling the doorway, and he wraps me in a hug that says, "I am here, and everything will be all right." He carries fresh pastries from our Sunday bakery, and we assemble a picnic on the coffee table, passing buttery croissants and fruit salad, as though staging a proper date in the heart of the care facility. Mom watches us, her lips curving at the edges. And for a moment, I glimpse the spirited woman who danced barefoot in our kitchen to Motown records, who taught me that love could twirl us free of sorrow. As dusk falls, I wheel her to the window seat where streetlights gleam like distant fireflies, and the city hums a lullaby of car horns and footsteps. I read aloud from my journal the truths I've dared to admit, the fear that surfaced when her diagnosis arrived. The guilt for the years I stayed away, the fierce pride in how she's lived bravely through illness, and her fingers tighten around mine as though bridging every gap time has carved. We close the day with a ritual I invented. I tuck a handwritten note under her pillow, reminders of our memories. Remember the apple orchard by Lake Geneva? Or the secret ingredient in your spaghetti sauce was always garlic and love, and she reads them in the dark, murmuring thanks as if regaining each treasured fragment. Weekends bring a larger adventure. We trade the hushed halls for a drive along the Charles River Esplanade, windows down to catch the spring breeze, and Mom hums old tunes. Moon River Summertime, her voice strong in patches of clarity, faltering in others, but always anchored by love. On one stroll, beneath an arch of wisteria, she pauses, pressing my hand to her heart. "I feel like a girl again," she says. And I kiss her temple, promising to guard that joy fiercely. As the seasons turn our lives interweave more deeply, I've settled into a rhythm that balances my remote work, leading the Alzheimer's campaign for the agency, crafting ads that celebrate resilience with caregiving, attending doctor visits, coordinating therapy sessions, consulting with nutritionists to adjust her diet as her appetite shifts. My boss has embraced my dual role, offering flexible hours, and even featuring our story in an industry newsletter, praising how personal passion can fuel professional excellence. Sometimes I catch myself marveling at how much I've grown, how I've learned to speak with kindness when frustration surfaces, to validate her emotions, even when they spring from confusion, to find humor in the gaps memory leaves behind. My father, once silent for years, calls weekly now, his voice tentative but warm. We swap memories, his about me as a toddler, taking her first steps, mine, of the day she pushed me on a swing until I felt I could touch the sky, and I feel the distance between them shrink, woven together by shared love and sorrow. He's planning a trip from California to visit her this summer, and I thrill at the thought of them reunited under one roof for the first time since the diagnosis. One afternoon in June, as cicadas drone and the world blooms into riotous green, I receive an invitation. Isaac is down on one knee, ring in hand, asking me to marry him in the garden courtyard, where Mom will celebrate with us. My eyes brim with tears when I wheel her to the spot, her cardigan brushed with pollen and joy. She studies the rose-etched band and lifts a trembling hand to my cheek. "You deserve every happiness," she whispers, voice thick with love and memory. I nod, pressing the ring onto my finger, as though sealing our family's new chapter. The wedding day arrives in a burst of sunshine. We exchange vows beneath a canopy of wisteria. Isaac's voice unwavering as he pledges to love and care for me in joy and sorrow, sickness and health. Mom watches from her seat of honor, her eyes reflecting petals drifting in the breeze, and when I take her hand, she squeezes it gently, her smile radiant despite the tremor in her throat. Later, under lanterns strung between oak branches, guests toast to family, to forgiveness, to second chances. And Mom lifts her champagne flute in her bathrobe, comfortable, familiar, and says, "To love that never forgets." I raise my glass and catch Isaac's eye, and in that moment, the long journey from that desperate voicemail in the snowstorm through frozen woods and hospital corridors to this circle of warmth and laughter resolves into one truth: that love endures beyond memory, that family can be rebuilt even when the map of our hearts has been reshaped by pain. As the stars glitter above, Mom leans into me and murmurs, "Thank you for finding me," and I cradle her close, whispering back, "Thank you for guiding me home, knowing that our path will wind onward. But together we will walk it, weaving new memories, even as old ones fade, forging a future bound by compassion, courage, and the unbreakable promise of love." Story 2. I'm Alex, and today I turned 21. You'd think that'd matter, big milestone birthday, right? A small dinner, a cake, at least a happy birthday text from my parents. But of course nothing. My family had other priorities. I wish I could say I was surprised, but honestly, this is par for the course. Since I was a kid, my parents made it clear I was their runner-up. My younger sister Emma is the golden child. Whatever she wants, she gets. Whatever attention she needs, it's hers. If I ever ask for something that even slightly inconveniences them, tough luck. Still, I clung to this tiny spark of hope that turning 21, finally an adult, would change things. I don't live at home anymore, so I dodge their favoritism most days, but surely on my 21st birthday, they'd make an exception, right? That morning, I texted the family group chat, "Hey, what time are we meeting for dinner?" Silence. Hours went by. I busied myself thinking someone would ping me back by early evening. Then came that familiar sinking feeling. I called my mom. She answered on the second ring too calmly. "Hey, Alex. What's up?" I swallowed hard. We're still on for dinner tonight, right?" A long pause, then a sigh. "Oh, honey," she said, far too sweet. "I should have told you earlier. We're going out tonight with Emma. She has some big news to celebrate." My stomach plummeted. "Excuse me," I managed. Her tone stayed detached, almost bored. "Emma's our focus tonight. We'll celebrate her news. Don't worry, a party for you next weekend." Behind her, I heard Emma's voice. "Is that Alex? Tell him we'll save him some leftovers." I hung up my birthday, disappearing in the background of their perfect little world. More laughter. I felt my face heat up. This wasn't just neglect. This was deliberate. I could have argued. I could have yelled. But what was the point? They knew what they were doing. They just didn't care. So I swallowed the lump in my throat and said, "Yeah, sure, have fun." And then I hung up. I sat there for a moment staring at my phone. My hands were shaking, not from sadness. No, I was pissed. Then I had an idea. I called my girlfriend Lily. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice even. "Want to go out for dinner tonight?" She could tell something was up immediately. "Of course. What's wrong?" I told her everything. She didn't even hesitate. "Come over. My parents will want to celebrate with you too. Now." I love Lily's parents. They've always treated me with more kindness in the past 3 years than my own parents have my whole life. And when I got to their house, her mom greeted me with a hug. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Come in. We're going somewhere nice." We ended up at this high-end steakhouse, the kind of place my parents love to brag about going to. The whole night was perfect. Lily's dad even ordered a bottle of champagne to celebrate me turning 21. And for the first time that day, I actually felt wanted. But the real fun that happened when I posted about it. After dinner, I took a picture of the restaurant entrance and posted it on Instagram with the caption, "Huge thank you to my girlfriend and her amazing family for making my birthday special. So grateful to have people who actually care about me." I wasn't expecting a response from my parents. I figured they wouldn't even see it until the next day. But less than an hour later, my phone started blowing up. First, a text from my mom. "Mom, what is this post, Alex?" Then my dad. "Dad, are you serious right now?" Then a full-on phone call. I let it ring, smirking to myself. Then another, then another. They were fuming, and I knew exactly why. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't regret. It was jealousy. They were the ones who were supposed to be seen as the good parents. They loved playing the role of the perfect family, posting online about their fancy dinners, and how proud they were of Emma. But suddenly, I was the one getting attention for being wronged, and they hated that. I finally picked up on the fourth call, keeping my voice casual. "Oh, hey, Mom. What's up?" She went off. "What the hell are you doing, Alex? People are seeing this. You're making us look bad." I held back a laugh. I'm just thanking the people who actually showed up for my birthday. She gasped like I had stabbed her. How dare you try to embarrass us like this? You know we would have celebrated with you if we didn't have prior commitments, I snorted. Oh, right. More exciting news. We raised you, Alex, she snapped, and this is how you repay us by making us look like that. Parents. I was done, so done. I took a deep breath and said, if you didn't want to look like bad parents, you probably shouldn't have acted like bad parents. Silence. Then my dad got on the phone. You need to take that post down now, I grinned. No, Alex. His voice was low, threatening. If you don't take it down, there will be consequences. I leaned back in my chair. Oh, like what? He didn't answer right away. I could hear my mom whispering furiously in the background. Then he said, we're coming over. And that Reddit is where things got really interesting. I leaned forward, gripping my phone as my dad's words echoed in my ear. We're coming over. A rush of adrenaline shot through me, but I kept my voice steady. All right, I said, barely able to contain my smirk. See you soon. Then I hung up. Lily, who had been sitting next to me on the couch, raised an eyebrow. That was your parents, wasn't it? Oh, yeah, I said, shaking my head. They're pissed. Apparently I've embarrassed them. Lily rolled her eyes. God forbid they deal with the consequences of their own actions. Her dad, who had been listening from across the room, scoffed. Let them come. They should see what an actual loving family looks like. Her mom, ever the voice of reason, sighed. This might get ugly. Are you sure you want to deal with them tonight? I exhaled slowly. Honestly, yeah, I do. I'd spent years letting them treat me like an afterthought. Years of watching them drop everything for Emma, while I was expected to just deal with it. And for the first time, I had the upper hand. They were desperate, scrambling to control the narrative. That meant I was finally doing something right. About 20 minutes later, I heard the unmistakable sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I stood up, stretching like I had all the time in the world, while Lily gave me an encouraging squeeze on the arm. You got this, she murmured. The doorbell rang. No. Slammed 3-4 times in rapid succession. Oh, they're mad, Matt. Lily's dad chuckled and made his way toward the door. I'll get it. The second he opened it, my mom stormed in like she owned the place. My dad followed, his jaw tight, his eyes immediately locking onto me. Alex! My mom's voice was sharp, cutting through the air. We need to talk now. I crossed my arms. Go ahead. Her gaze flickered around the room, taking in Lily's parents, the cozy atmosphere, the clear evidence that I was fine, thriving, even without them. It clearly unsettled her. Not here, she said stiffly. Come outside. No thanks, I said, leaning against the couch. If you have something to say, you can say it right here. My dad clenched his fists. Enough with the attitude, Alex. I raised an eyebrow. Attitude? Oh, you mean standing up for myself? Sorry. I'm still getting used to this whole having self-respect thing. My mom let out a sharp breath, her patience wearing thin. We are not going to let you publicly shame us like this. Do you have any idea how many people have seen your post? Your aunts? Your uncles? Do you know how humiliated it is to have our own son paint us as villains? I blinked at her, then deadpanned. Maybe don't be villains then. Lily snorted, and even her dad fought back a chuckle. My mom's face turned red. We are your parents, Alex. We deserve some respect. Oh, respect. You mean like the respect you showed me when you ditched me on my birthday? Or when you laughed at me on the phone, but when you made it abundantly clear that Emma will always come first? I shook my head. Sorry. I must have missed the part where you actually earn my respect. My dad took a step forward, his voice low. You're being dramatic. No, I'm finally being honest, I shot back. The tension in the room was thick. My parents weren't used to this. They were used to me backing down, apologizing for folding. But not this time. Then my mom's gaze landed on Lily. More specifically, the way she was sitting so comfortably beside me, holding my hand like she belonged in my life. And that's when I saw it. The moment my mom realized that I had people now. People who weren't obligated to love me, but did anyway. People who saw my worth. Something she never cared to do, and she hated it. So this is what this is about, she said, voice dripping with condescension. You're trying to replace us with them. Lily stiffened beside me, but I just shrugged. If the shoe fits, my dad scoffed. Enough of this nonsense. You're taking that post down now. I grinned. No. His nostrils flared. Alex, don't test me, or what I challenged. What exactly are you going to do? Ground me. Take away my phone. Oh, wait. You can't, because I don't live under your roof anymore. You have zero control over me. That hit a nerve. My dad's face turned an ugly shade of red, and for a second, I thought he was actually going to lose it. My mom, on the other hand, had gone eerily quiet, and that's when she played her trump card. You're going to regret this, Alex, she said softly. You don't realize what you're throwing away. I tilted my head. What am I throwing away exactly? She gave me a knowing look. I looked at send a cold chill down my spine, and then she said, your inheritance. I couldn't help it. I actually laughed in her face. It was almost instinctual, like a reflex. I couldn't hold back. I looked at my mom, eyes narrowing, and let out a short, bitter laugh. Inheritance, I echoed, still chuckling. What inheritance? You think I need your money. You really don't get it, do you? She froze, clearly thrown off by my reaction. I leaned forward, crossing my arms. You've never done anything for me. You've made it clear every chance you've gotten that I'm not important enough for your time, your energy, or your love, so spare me the lecture about what I'm throwing away. Because guess what? You've got nothing left to give me. My mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish, her face twisted in a mix of confusion and anger. And if you think I'd ever accept anything from you after all this, you're delusional. I continued, shaking my head. I don't need your money. I don't need your fake love. You've already given me everything I need to know about you, and it's nothing I'm willing to keep around. My dad looked like he was about to explode. He took a deep breath, his fist clenched at his sides. You're ungrateful. You really want to throw away everything we've given you? I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered he had a choice too. He could have stood up for me, could have actually been a parent instead of a lapdog to my mom's whims. He never did. No. I'm not ungrateful, I said calmly. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend I don't see the kind of people you are. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine. Lily's dad gave me a reassuring nod from across the room, his eyes full of quiet pride. I noticed my mom flinch at that, and I couldn't help but feel a small sense of triumph. She had been so consumed with controlling my life that she'd never even stopped to think that I might be better off without her. You can't just cut us out of your life like this. My mom said, her voice trembling now. We're your family. You'll regret this, Alex. You'll come crawling back, right? I said sarcastically. I'll be right there begging for more empty promises and disrespect. But that'll never happen, because guess what? You've already shown me who you really are. I stood up, my legs feeling surprisingly steady. And I'm done, so if you want to keep throwing threats and guilt trips at me, go ahead. But just know I'm not falling for it anymore. My dad opened his mouth again, but this time he just snapped it shut. They had nothing left. The power they once held over me, the manipulation, the control. It was gone. My mom's eyes were practically burning with fury, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I turned to Lily's parents, giving them a nod of appreciation. Thanks for letting me have this moment, I said softly. But I think it's time for them to leave. Lily's mom, Ever, the calm one, smiled and stood up. We're going to grab a drink in the kitchen. You two should talk. As they walked away, my mom's voice shot through the silence. You're making a mistake, Alex. You'll see. I didn't even acknowledge her. I was done listening to their empty threats. I didn't need to say anything else. The silence between us was thick, suffocating, as my mom and dad stood there, still processing everything I'd just thrown at them. They had no idea what to do with me anymore. Their usual tactics, guilt manipulation, the emotional blackmail they had always used to keep me under their thumb weren't working. Not this time. I stood there feeling more powerful than I ever had in my entire life. It wasn't just the fact that I was finally standing up to them. It was the realization that I no longer cared about their approval. Lily's parents stayed in the background, sensing the tension, but giving us the space we needed. I could feel their support without it ever needing to be said. They weren't just on my side. They were family in a way that felt real. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to apologize for existing. Finally, my dad spoke again, his voice low and dangerous. "You think this is funny? You think you're going to get away with treating us like this?" I locked eyes with him, unfazed. "Get away with it, Dad. I've been trying to get away from you for years." The words hung in the air, stark and painful. It was like a weight I'd been carrying for so long, finally lifted off my chest. My mom, still fuming, tried one last tactic. Her voice softened, but it was clear she was just as manipulative as ever. "Alex, we're your parents. We've always been here for you. All we've ever wanted was to help you. Don't you remember all we've done for you, how we've always supported you?" I shook my head, trying not to laugh again. "Really, is that what you think? Because I don't remember any of it. I remember being ignored, pushed aside, made to feel like I wasn't good enough. I remember being the last choice. But sure, if you want to pretend that you've been perfect, go ahead." Her face twisted in a mixture of shock and fury, and I could see the cracks in her perfect little world start to form. She hadn't expected me to fight back like this. She thought I would fold. Then I would cave in and beg for their approval, like I always had. But that wasn't who I was anymore. "This is your fault, Alex," my mom spat, her voice shaking. "You're the one destroying this family. You think you can just replace us with them." I looked at her, my eyes cold. "No, Mom. You've been replacing me my whole life. This is just me finally realizing I don't need you anymore, and you've already lost." She took a step forward, her eyes burning with rage. "I'm your mother. You will never get rid of me." I held up my hand, cutting her off. "I don't need to get rid of you. You've already done that to yourself. You've pushed me away for years. You've made it clear where your priorities lie, and I'm not on that list." Lily's dad stepped forward, his calm demeanor cutting through the tension. "I think it's time for you two to leave now." His voice was steady, unshakable in the finality, and his tone made it clear there would be no more discussion. My mom stared at him, fury flashing in her eyes, but even she knew she was losing. My dad muttered something under his breath and started to walk toward the door, his shoulders tense. But he didn't say another word. They both walked out without another word, the door slamming behind them. I stood there still processing everything that had just happened. It was surreal. Lily came over and wrapped her arms around me. "You did it," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You stood up for yourself. I'm so proud of you." I hugged her back, feeling a rush of relief wash over me. I don't even know how I did it. It's like they just finally don't have any power over me anymore. Her mom and dad came over and gave me encouraging pats on the back, but it was Lily's words that really stuck with me. "You're not alone anymore. We've got your back. Always." The weight on my chest had finally lifted. For the first time, I could breathe without that constant pressure weighing me down. I could see a future where I didn't have to beg for scraps of love or attention. A future where I made my own choices, where I was in control. The whole night felt like a strange, surreal blur, but I knew one thing for sure. I had finally stood up for myself, and I wasn't going back. Hours passed in. The evening continued on, in a strange kind of calm. The tension that had built up throughout the night seemed to have evaporated the moment my parents walked out the door. But that calmness didn't last long. Just as I started to relax, my phone burst. I glanced down at it, half expecting something Monday, but as I saw my mom's name flashed across the screen, I could feel my blood pressure rise again. I didn't even want to look at it, but I did anyway. A text from her. "We're not done here. You'll regret this. We'll be contacting the lawyer about your inheritance. You'll pay for this." I could almost hear her shrill, venomous voice in my head as I read the message. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise, and I knew it. But the difference now is that it didn't scare me anymore. It didn't hold the weight it once did. I glanced at Lily, who was sitting next to me, her parents giving us some space to just process the night. I showed her the message, and she let out a soft laugh. "Is she serious?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Dead serious," I muttered, but there was no trace of fear in my voice. If anything, I was amused. I hit the reply button, my fingers typing with confidence, almost like the words were coming from a part of me I didn't even know existed. "You're right. You won't be done here. But I'll tell you this. Keep your money. You can keep your inheritance. And when you decide you want to talk to me like an adult without the threats and the manipulation, you know where to find me. But don't bother trying anything else. It won't work. And if you think I'm scared, you've got another thing coming. I hit send, and the weight that had been on my shoulders for so long felt even lighter. It felt like I had closed a chapter of my life that had dragged on for way too long. Just as I put my phone down, it buzzed again. This time it was my dad. He didn't even bother with a message, just a string of angry voice notes. I clicked on the first one, listening to him rant about how I was ruining my life, how I was going to regret this, how I was throwing everything away. I let the message finish, then click the next one. Another tirade, the same insults, the same empty threats. And then another, and another. They were getting more frantic, the desperation in his voice growing, but none of it hit home. I didn't even bother replying. I didn't need to. There was nothing left for me to say. Lily's dad caught my eye from across the room, raising his eyebrows with a knowing look. "Everything okay?" I nodded, my lips curling into a small but satisfied smile. "Yeah, they're just not used to me standing up for myself, but they'll get over it." Lily leaned in closer, wrapping her arms around me again. "You've got this. They can't touch you anymore." And that was the truth. I realized something then. There was nothing they could take from me that mattered. Not their threats, not their manipulations, not even their inheritance. I'd already walked away from their version of family and stepped into something real. My phone buzzed again, and I glanced down. This time it was a text from my sister. "Mom and Dad are furious with you. You really messed up this time." I could feel the old anger bubbling up again, but this time I wasn't going to let it control me. I wasn't going to get sucked into her drama, her victim complex. I wasn't going to play her game. Instead of replying, I looked at Lily, smiling warmly. "You know what I said standing up? I think it's time for a celebration. I'm done with all of this." I grabbed my jacket, turning to Lily's parents with a grin. "Let's go grab some drinks. We've got a lot to celebrate." As we left, I didn't feel the bitterness or regret I had expected. Instead, I felt like I was finally walking away from a life that had been holding me back into a future that was mine to shape. And as I stepped out into the cool night air, I realized that the family I'd been searching for, the family I had been longing for, had been here all along. Not in the people I was born to, but in the ones who chose to stand by me, who supported me, who cared about me. I didn't need anyone's approval anymore. I didn't need their toxic love or their manipulation. I had found something better, and nothing, not even their money or their threats, could take that away from me. And that, for the first time in my life, felt like true freedom. So what do you think? Am I out of line for standing up to them? Or did I do the right thing?